Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to do an exciting little project, and it is going to be installing a deck on top of a concrete slab. Now, a lot of people might look at doing this as an option if you've got like a little courtyard and you don't want to dig holes and stumps. There's definitely a way to do decking on top of a hard structure like slab or pavers. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do it for our house, and maybe you can take some little tips and stuff along the way, but let's get stuck straight into it. Alrighty, so we've screwed off our two end joists over the whole length, and what I've done to try and find that nice level sweet spot in the middle, I've run a string line all the way across just from one end, but I've sat a 10mm packer under it, as you can see. So the point of that exercise is to slide a 10mm packer along each of the joists in the middle that are just floating there, and if it touches the string line, it means it's sitting up too high, and I probably need to lift my sides up a little bit to suit that high point in the middle. But if it's got a little bit of a gap under it, it means I need to pack the bottom of the joist to suit. So it's a nice easy way of figuring out how to get that nice flat plane all the way across the deck. I'm definitely not trying to do it level because it falls away from the house, and it's a pretty old brittle slab and it's kind of sinking to one side too. So I just want to find that nice little flat center point all the way through. So now that these string lines are set up, we'll set these up with some little packers and then just get drilling. Alright, so now that we've got all of our joists screwed down, and as you can see behind us, we've constructed a bit of a landing for our front door as well, which is really cool. It's going to be like a little 90mm step up, and we're going to have a couple of big planters next to the front door, which is a really nice feature just to keep it all from being so flat. It's nice to have a bit of levels there. So now that that's all finished, it's time to start getting into the decking boards. It can be a little bit of a daunting task if you haven't done something like decking before, but the easiest way to set it up right from the get-go, get your first board nice and straight, and then what we're going to do is create a kind of bay area. And what you'll see me do just shortly is set up a bay where it's essentially two perfectly straight boards, and then you just leave enough space in between for four or five boards, and the gaps in between each board, and then we use a series of wedges to pack that out perfectly straight. And what that does is sets up a really beautiful straight line to start with, and then you can start building up off that, rather than trying to bite off more than you can chew and just try and lay 10 boards all at once and try and get the spacings right. These natural timbers can have all sorts of bends and bows in them, so it can be really difficult to work with. So just pick little strips at a time and then build up off of that. So let's get into it. 2 perfectly straight boards, parallel, and I believe it's enough for 4 boards in between. So it's just a nice sort of spacing. It just takes this small little bit of decking part at a time. And now what we're going to do is just pretty much lay all the boards inside, get all the joints nice and cut over the joists, and then leave the edges overhanging, and then we'll chop them off nice and flat at the end. But now it's just sort of dealing with a nice small part at a time, and then from there we'll expand off and do the top of the landing, and then do behind me here, and we'll just work our way bit by bit like so. Probably a little bit more information about what I've got here. Specifically, we're using a nice Blackbutt 135mm board. I love Blackbutt. I think it's a fantastic timber. I generally enjoy working with it. I think it's pretty good. It's a nice hardy product. We've used it on all of our planter boxes, and they've been in there for a year and a half and haven't moved, haven't cupped, haven't split. I think they've weathered on their own as well, so it's a really good round board. And we're also using a nice 50mm screw. Now on screws, really important, we're using a 55mm stainless steel screw. Obviously it needs to be stainless steel, but there's a really important piece of the screw here, which is the flat section at the top, which doesn't have any thread on it. Now, because we've used joists on a slab setup here, if you use a nice long screw, obviously it's going to foul on the concrete and it's not going to work very well. The problem with small decking screws is that the thread goes all the way up to the head. Now, that's really problematic when you're installing decks, because that thread, if it goes all the way to the top of the head, it doesn't allow the screw to pull the board down. What this shank does is pulls the board down as you're screwing it through. So without that, you'll find that there'll be lots of gaps in between your joists and your decking boards, and it's going to sit wonky, it's not going to sit hard down, and you're not going to get that even finish. So make sure that you're using screws that has that little bit of flat shank at the top here with no thread, so that it really pulls the board down. And you might also notice that I haven't used any protection on top of the joists. A lot of people like to use joist protectors. There are all sorts of different products, even the plastic strips over the top of it to protect it. I'm not really too stressed here. It doesn't really cop any weather at all, being under a veranda. So I'm not really going to go to the lengths of it, but it's all treated pine, so it's going to last tens of years, and we're not really going to have any issues with it in the future. But if you were really pedantic and you really wanted to protect your sort of your asset, I guess you could call it, it's definitely worth recommend doing it, just to really help spread that layer between the moisture of the joist and the deck when it rains. If you get moisture sitting in between those two layers, that's when your rot starts to build up and you start to get the decay. Those joist protectors will help keep your structure nice and dry, and also keep your decking boards dry as well. I've just zipped up a handful of these little wedges, so I'll just use these from the offcuts of the decking boards that we've just laid behind me, ready to go. So what we're going to do is, along each joist, or a few joists at a time, we're going to wedge all these little wedges in, and that's going to help us even out the gaps over this bay. It's a little bit easier rather than trying to set it up with either a packer, a 5mm packer or something like that between each board, because it can sometimes vary between board thicknesses here and there by a few mil. So what the beauty is about these wedges is that you can just put them in each of them and you can adjust as necessary. You might want to widen them, and then you can even out that gap over the whole bay. And by 1 or 2 mil, you're never going to know the difference, and you're going to get a really consistent join all the way through, and your gap's going to look nice and neat. So let's give it a go.